We will begin Shabbos Daf Samach Ches at the bottom of Daf Samach Zayin because it is the beginning of a new chapter, the 7th Perek of Masechet Shabbos, Perek Klal Gadol. Now this chapter primarily discusses the halacha of bringing a carbon chatos if somebody violates Shabbos by accident. Somebody makes a mistake. Now the halacha is as follows. Somebody who accidentally commits a transgression of Shabbos has to bring a carbon, a chatos, and the question is, what if somebody does multiple transgressions? How many chatos does he have to bring? So the rule in all situations of chatos is that for each lapse of knowledge, meaning for each mistake that you make, you have to bring one chatos. If there are multiple transgressions that are caused by one mistake, you only have to bring one for that mistake and all the transgressions that happen because of it. Now, if you make a mistake and you do a malacha and then you find out and you realize you're a mistake and then you make the same mistake again, that's considered a new mistake. So in Hilchos Shabbos there are many different ways to categorize mistakes. There are different types of mistakes that you can make, and some of them will cover all transgressions, and some will cover specific transgressions, and some will cover very specific, and you'll have to bring a separate one for each of them. So the Mishnah begins by teaching us 3 levels of mistake. One, the most broad mistake that you could possibly make is to forget that there's such a thing as Shabbos in the world, or never know that there's such a thing as Shabbos in the world. You were not aware of something called Shabbos. Then it doesn't matter how many Shabbosim you violated and you didn't keep, or how many different malachos you did. Either way, you only made one mistake. You didn't know that Shabbos exists, so you have to bring one chatos. Now, what if somebody knows Shabbos exists? He just doesn't know today is Shabbos. So on that we say that each day that he didn't know today was Shabbos, all the malachas that he does that day are one mistake. He didn't know today was Shabbos. That's his mistake for the day. Now that doesn't cover next week though, because you could have found out that next week was Shabbos, and you didn't. So that's a separate mistake, and all the malachas that you do that day are all covered in the one chatas for that day of Shabbos. And then the third most specific category is if you know the day is Shabbos, you just forget that a certain malacha is asur. You know today is Shabbos, but you forget that it's forbidden to harvest crops. So then harvesting crops is one chatos, and any other malacha you'll do is a separate chatos. Even on different Shabbosim, if you forget that that a certain category of malacha is forbidden from Shabbos to Shabbos, we cannot expect you to find that out from Shabbos to Shabbos, so it's still the same mistake. But every specific category of malacha that you'll end up violating is considered a separate answer. Now, if you have 2 malachas in the same category, which are what we call 2 toldos in the same av, right? The major category is called an av, and the subcategories are called toldos. So if you have an av and a tolda of it, or 2 toldos within the same av, that's one mistake. We only divide up the chatais per category, per av malacha. Okay, that's what the Mishnah teaches us, and it introduces all this by calling it a great rule, a klal gadol, a great rule. So as the Gemara always will do, it first clears up linguistic issues, and it says, why do you call this a great rule? What is great about this rule? The Gemara is going to have 3 potential answers to explain why this is called a great rule. We'll reject the first 2 because they don't apply to other situations, and we'll settle on the third one. So before we do that, let's keep in mind that where do we find the term klal gadol in Shas? Where do we find the term great rule? So we find it here by Shabbos. We find it about Shemitah. There's a great rule about Shavias, the mitzvah to let the land lie fallow once every 7 years, kind of like a Shabbos for the land. We find it there. And about Meiser, discussing the halacha of bringing a tenth of your crops to the Levi, the Meiser over there we have a split. Our Mishnayos don't use the term klal gadol, they just call it a klal, they just call it a rule. But the Brises written by Bar Kapara, they do call it a klal gadol. So we're going to have to explain these 3 things. Shabbos, Shemitah, and Meiser, according to Bar Kapara, why are they called a great rule more than any other place where you have a klal that's called not such a great rule? So the Gemara's first offering is that you call something a klal gadol if there are smaller klalim to follow. In our Perek, later on, we're going to have a smaller rule, not a big rule. So therefore we call this one a big rule. So Gemara says, okay, that works for Shemitah, because in Shemitah, where it says a big rule, there's also a small rule to follow. However, in Meiser, according in our Mishnayos, where Meiser is not called a great rule, the rule that's said is not called a great rule, now you have a problem, because there is another smaller rule following the great rule, so how come the first rule is not called the great rule? Obviously, the reason that we use the term great rule has nothing to do with smaller rules that follow. So the Gemara tries another suggestion, Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, and he says the reason why it's called a great rule is because the field of that halacha has avos and taldos. It has prime categories of prohibitions and subcategories, and since it's set up in a way of categories, so we have a great rule, so we call a rule there a great rule. So the Gemara says, okay, this works for Shabbos, which has prime categories and subcategories, as we will learn later in this chapter. It also works by Shemitah, which has prime categories and subcategories. The rules of planting, plowing, pruning, harvesting, these are all subcategories in Shvius. However, Meiser doesn't have any subcategories. It doesn't have any avos and taldos. How come Bar Kapara calls that Klal Gadol, a great rule? So the Gemara offers its third and final answer. The Gemara says we only use the term Klal Gadol whenever there is another category, there is another mitzvah that has klalim that are less applicable than our category. Okay, so Shabbos, Shemitah, Meiser, and also Peah use the word klal. But Shabbos applies in more situations than Shemitah does, because Shabbos applies both to things that are growing from the ground and to things that have been picked off the ground before Shabbos. Shemitah, however, does not apply to anything that was picked before Shemitah. Shemitah applies in more cases than Meiser does, because Shemitah applies to food for humans that grow from the ground and food for animals. Meiser doesn't apply to animal food. But Meiser applies in more cases than Peah does, because Peah only applies to a very specific set of things which grow, and it does not apply to figs and doesn't apply to vegetables, as the Brisa will prove soon. And therefore, Meiser is more inclusive than Peah is. Therefore, Shabbos, Shemitah, and Meiser are all more inclusive, and that is an explanation as to why we use the term Klal Gadol. It is a great rule because it applies to a great mitzvah which is more inclusive than something else which also uses the term Klal or rule. Now, where do you see that Meiser applies to more things than Peah? The Gemara now quotes a Mishnah which lists the conditions required for something to be applicable to the mitzvah of Peah. It has to be something which is food as opposed to plants grown for ink. It has to be that it is protected as opposed to something which doesn't belong to anybody. It has to be something which grows from the ground as opposed to other types of food. It has to be something which is harvested all at one. That excludes figs which aren't harvested in one crop. They're harvested each fig when it ripens. And it has to be something which is stored for long term, which excludes vegetables which cannot be stored for long term. They have to be brought to market fresh as they grow. Now, however, these last two halachas don't apply to Meiser. Meiser have the first halachas, but Meiser does apply to vegetables and to figs, even though they're not picked off all in one shot, and that explains why the term Klal Gadol is used for Meiser as well as the other things in Bar Kapara's Mishnah. The Gemara now discusses the halacha that we saw in the Mishnah, which is that there were three levels of shogeg on Shabbos. The first one was somebody who was unaware that such a thing as Shabbos exists at all, and for that, the Gemara says he doesn't have to bring any more than one korban chatas, because that's only one mistake, even for all the Shabbosos that he did not keep. So now the Gemara has a question. What do we mean he didn't know that there's such a thing as Shabbos at all? That means that he never learned. He was a tinik shenishba, a child who was captured, or a ger that was raised between the goyim and he never knew anything about Shabbos, he never heard of it? Or does it mean somebody who heard about Shabbos, he just forgot? The existence of the concept of Shabbos flew out of his mind. So the Gemara has a machlokas about this. Rav and Shmuel is the first opinion. Rav and Shmuel says the Mishnah is referring to the first case, the one who never knew about Shabbos, the one who had it fly out of his mind. He's not going to get away with only one chatas. He has to bring a chatas for every Shabbos that he does not keep. So the Gemara says, but what do you mean? You look at the wording of the Mishnah. It says, Hashoicheach Iker Shabbos. Somebody who forgets about Shabbos. That means he knew, but he forgot. That's what the Mishnah was referring to when it says you only have to bring one chatas for all the weeks that you forgot. So the Gemara says, no, that the wording is imprecise. It doesn't mean he forgot. It means that he was never aware. It means the existence of Shabbos was forgotten from him, not that he ever was aware of it. Okay, so the Gemara says, now you have a problem though, because if you're right that this person has to bring a has to bring achatas for every single Shabbos, the one who knew about Shabbos and forgot about it. So then, why does the Gemara teach that halacha in the case of somebody who forgot that today was Shabbos? You don't have to go so far to find the case of somebody has to bring a chiyuv achatas for every Shabbos. Just say that the guy had heard of Shabbos, but he forgot about it. So the Gemara says, you're right. That is the halacha. The one who forgot that today was Shabbos, who knew about the existence of Shabbos, forgot that today was Shabbos, which is the next level underneath this, he doesn't bring just for every Shabbos, he brings for every malacha that he did, not just for every Shabbos that he forgot, which is the lower level. That's what we had as the halacha for the third level. So the Gemara says, you just kick the question one level further. So now I'll ask you, so when we say the third level halacha, why do we have to go to the case of the guy who knew today was Shabbos and forgot that this malacha was azar? Say this case, the guy who knew that Shabbos exists, but he forgot today was Shabbos. You're saying that applies to this third level. What has happened here is that we've introduced a fourth level. The Mishnah had three levels of halachos. Rav and Shmuel said that the middle level, the new level, is between the highest level and the second level. And that's really the halacha that the Mishnah says the second level, which means we have to push that Mishnah's case. That halacha is really the new third level, and now we're left with the fourth level that doesn't have a case to sit on. So the Gemara backtracks this, and the Gemara says, no, it's not really what Rav and Shmuel said. Rav and Shmuel said that both the case of somebody who never knew about Shabbos and somebody who knew about Shabbos and forgot that such a thing exists, those are both the same. Those both count as the highest level, and he only has to bring one carbon chatas for all the Shabbos that he didn't keep. However, there's another shita, and that's Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. They say, no, there's a distinction between the two, but the distinction is not that Rav and Shmuel said it, it's the other way around. The Mishnah was talking about the case of somebody who knew that there's such a thing as Shabbos and he forgot all about it. What about somebody who never heard of Shabbos in his life? He doesn't have to bring a chatas at all. He is not in this discussion. He's a level higher. He's a level less responsible for chatas. His level is above the three levels we discussed. Meaning Rav and Shmuel said that that's the level of our Mishnah, and they inserted a new level between level 1 and 2. And Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish say, no, our Mishnah was referring to somebody who forgot about Shabbos, and the case of somebody who never heard of Shabbos, that wasn't discussed in the Mishnah at all. He doesn't have to bring a chatas at all. There's no such thing as a carbon chatas for him. So the Gemara says, that's very nice, but there's a brayso that says not that way. And the Gemara quotes a brayso which says, Machokas between Rabbi Akiva and Munbaz, and it's about somebody who never heard of Shabbos at all, and he never heard of Chaylev, and he never heard of the Isser to drink blood. So what do you have to do for him? So it's a machlokes. Rabbi Akiva says he has to bring a carbon chatos, and Munbaz says he doesn't have to bring any chatos at all. So before we get to the Gemara's kasha, the brayso continues with the conversation between Rabbi Akiva and Munbaz. Munbaz says that such a person would not have to bring a chatos at all, and I can prove it to you. The only way that you can be chayav a chatos is if you knew that such a sin exists. How do I know? Because when the Torah refers to a mezid and a shoygeg, mezid is somebody who violates a sin on purpose, and shoygeg is one who makes a mistake. It calls them both a choyte, a sinner. So that means that they both have to be somebody who sinned. They both have to be similar. It has to be that he at least knew that this thing was forbidden, that it exists, that such a isser exists in the world. But somebody who never heard of a Shabbos doesn't count as a sinner at all, and therefore doesn't have to bring a carbon chatos. So Rabbi Akiva says, by that logic, that a shogeg and a mezid have to be the same, so then you should tell me that a shogeg and a mezid both have to be somebody who knows what he was doing. And he knew that what he's doing is usher. And in both cases, you have to bring a chatas for one of them, you have to bring a chatas for both of them, but we know that that's not halacha, we know that that's not true. You don't have to bring a chatas if you're a mezid. So Munbaz says back, no, you're right. A mezid also has to bring a chatas. And the Gemara will explain this opinion more at length in the daf later. Not today's daf, later. So, anyway, what's the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish? The Gemara says, because you see, Rabbi Akiva clearly says that even if you never heard of Shabbos in your life, you never heard of a number of other averos in your life, you still have to bring a carbon chatas. So Gemara says, okay, but what about Munbaz? Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish will hold like Munbaz. Munbaz said that you don't have to bring a chatas. Okay, now the Gemara says, how do you understand Munbaz's opinion? Apparently his argument to Rabbi Akiva is not the source of his halacha. Source of his halacha is that there's actually a hekesh between a shogeg and a mezid. Somebody does the sin on purpose and by mistake, because it says Tera achasi alachem lo eiser b'shgaga, and right after it says v'hanefesh asher taseh b'yad Rama. So you have linked together the one who violates the sin by accident, the one who violates it on purpose, and they're both linked together, and therefore the only way that you can have a Chiyuv Chatas is if you have a common denominator between Shogeg and Mezid, that you had heard of this Isser. You knew that such a thing was forbidden at some point. Okay, so now the Gemara says, so what are the Chachamim, meaning Rabbi Akiva, what are they going to do with the Pasuk Torah Achas? This Hekish, what is it for? So Gemara says it's for the halacha of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that you only have to bring a korban chatas for the type of sin that had you done it on purpose, the punishment would be kares. What's the limud? For the fact that it says v'nefesh shetasa biyad rama, which is referring to avodah zara, and here it says terachas lechem lois bishgaga. So you're linking other chiyuv chatas and avodah zara, and just like avodah zara, you get kares if you do it on purpose. You only have to bring a chatas for anything where you get kares if you do it on purpose.